Hello and welcome back to Real World Magic, where we make your life more magical. My name's Neil, I'm going to be your magical host, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about persuasion, which is why the background is white and not the usual dungeon. But if you feel a bit more comfortable with the dungeon, let's do that. Okay, so let's talk about persuasion. Now, I have a lot of experience teaching this sort of stuff. I used to teach in mainly the southwest of England, Exeter University, Plymouth University, Marjon University. I also did a bit at the University Hospital Wales, University of Reading, a bit in Stockholm as well, and various other schools and colleges around. So, why am I telling you that? Well, this is Aristotle. He's an ancient Greek philosopher, and he's said to be the father of modern persuasion. He came up with 3 rules. They are ethos, pathos, and logos. Yes, they're Greek. He was Greek. Sue him. Anyway, the whole idea is that ethos, pathos and logos relate to ethos, which is the character, pathos, which is the emotion, and logos, which is the logical reason for change. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So whenever I talk about persuasion, I always give my credentials up front, and the reason for that is because you need to know the character of the persuader. If you've been here for a while, then hopefully you'll know that my character is fairly reliable, and that I won't really need to present myself as an authority figure, but I'm doing it just in case you haven't been on this channel before. Of course, if you've been to any conferences in the past, you'll know that people are introduced, and they're introduced by the person who has the biggest character in the room. That doesn't mean the funniest or the most erudite. I'm talking about the person who probably is the person to bring you to that conference in the first place, maybe the organizer or something like that, like the head honcho. They introduce everybody because they're lending their character out to the speakers, who are then going to do the rest of the persuading in that section. So ethos is the character of the persuader. Then you've got pathos, which is the pathological or the emotional reason for change. So let's think about this time of year. Christmas has lots of wide-eyed, wet-eyed kids and homeless people and old people and dogs. All of these charities advertise around this sort of time of year because it's an emotional time. They have emotional adverts, often black and white, slow things right down, have some moody music, that sort of thing, and maybe a narrator in a soft voice, luring you into a false sense of security so that you can open up your wallet and give them tons of cash. So that's the emotional reason for change. So we've got ethos, the character, pathos, which is the pathological or the emotional reason for change. Next is logos. Logos in persuasion means you have to do something in order to get something, so it's logical. Do this, get that. Don't do this, don't get that. Do this, get this feeling. Don't do this, don't get this feeling. Let's say you're being mugged. Not a nice image, I know, but let's say you are. The character has a gun. What's the character of that persuader? Suddenly, if they've got a gun, and certainly in this country where guns are illegal, if they've got a gun in this country, the chances are they've got the character that could hurt you. Because if you can get hold of a gun in the UK, the chances are you're the sort of person that could use it. Next is pathos, or the pathological or emotional reason for change. If you've got a gun being pointed at you, that's pretty emotional, because you're in fear. Fear is one of the most emotional states that you can be in. Next is logos, or logic. If someone points a gun at you, they've got the character, they've got the emotion. Next they're saying, give me your money or I will fire this at your face. That's a pretty logical argument, and I would hand over my wallet. Please don't track me down just to test that theory, because I would. I'd give you my wallet. So we have ethos, we have pathos, we have logos. So those are 3 different ways that you can persuade people. But how do you actually go about doing it? Well, next you need to work out how you're thinking. People think in lots of different ways, and the world around us is not only what we perceive. We perceive things, we filter things, and our reality is made by us. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole quantum physics thing. Maybe that's for another video, where we can actually change reality merely by looking at it. It's true, it's not science fiction, and it's kind of magic. I think it's magic. But maybe I'll go into that with another video. Anyway, for now, people do look at the world and they filter it and they create their own reality based on filters. Now, if you don't understand or don't believe what I'm saying, I'll give you some examples. First, there's deletion. Deletion is a really, really powerful tool where we're being bombarded with stuff all the time. So right now I can see a light box, a camera, a microphone, a tripod stand, a camera box over here, and then a couple of remote controls, a sofa, there's a vacuum cleaner in the corner. I'm being bombarded with all of this stuff, plus all of the lights overhead. And do you forget what the first thing I said was? Probably not, because I've just mentioned lights, but what was the second thing I said? I can't even remember. So the fact that I've got all of this stuff going on at the same time, it's overwhelming. The only thing that my brain can do is to delete stuff. Now, to prove this, until I said this sentence, you were probably unaware of how your backside felt in your chair. If you're standing up, maybe how one of your legs feels. But until I said it, you didn't think about it. But now you're thinking about it because I've mentioned it. Now, you can do that with negative language as well. So you can say, don't think about a black cat on my hand, a tiny little black cat. Don't think about that black cat. I know it sounds silly that there's a tiny black cat on my hand, but there isn't. And I've told you to forget about it anyway. But now you're thinking about the black cat because I've mentioned it. And so you think about the black cat even though it's not actually there, even though I've told you not to think about it. And in fact, you're thinking about that black cat so much, you've probably forgotten about how your backside feels. And so you can get people to delete things just by overwhelming their senses and talking about other things. I've just dropped that black cat. Next up is distortion. Distortion is a really interesting one because without distortion you wouldn't know how to make sense of the world. I've seen this light before, but had I not seen that light before, I would still recognise it was a light. Because otherwise, if I look at something new in the category of light and I haven't seen it before, I wouldn't be able to distort my memory in order to make sense that that is a light. So let's look at this thing. It has 4 legs and a seat. Is it a table or is it a chair? Well, I think everyone would agree that it's a chair, but how do we know? Because we can sit on it? Well, a horse has 4 legs and we can sit on that too. Does that mean that a horse is a chair? No. The reason is that we can distort but within certain parameters. So when we're making sense of the world, we delete and we distort. So the next one is generalization. Now, generalization is another good filter because if we can generalize about something, we can ignore it. It allows us to delete. It also allows us to distort. So when you're walking upstairs, for example, you'll often delete the fact that you're walking up the stairs completely. You won't consciously think about it. It'll go into your unconscious mind and it'll just deal with it. But we delete the fact that the floor is solid. So right now you may think, well, is the floor solid? It probably is, otherwise you're sinking. So we generalise about things all the time. We generalise that there's going to be enough air and that we're not going to have to struggle for our next breath. And so we can forget about it. It allows us to delete it. So without generalisation, we wouldn't be able to delete or distort, because if we generalise that all cups in the cupboard are empty, then we can grab a cup and we don't have to think about emptying it before we make ourselves a cup of tea. If we generalise about things like the car being full with fuel, then we'll just turn the ignition, and until such time as we get other information that the car is now out of fuel, we'll just keep on driving. So all of this deletion, distortion and generalisation allow us to make sense of the world. Of course, you can make use of this sort of thing if you're going to try and persuade people. And I'm going to get onto that in another video. So I'm doing a whole course on this sort of stuff. Now, if you want to find out more about persuasion, you can become one of these awesome people and join me on Patreon, and the links are down in the description. Trust me, there is a huge amount more to learn. So, for example, how to get a member of the opposite sex, or the same sex depending on your own orientation, using persuasion skills is possible, not particularly ethical, but certainly possible. How to gain rapport with people, how to win at interviews, how to speed up people's drinking speed. And this is a really interesting experiment that I've done many times. It's always worked. So you can actually get people to speed up how fast they drink simply by gaining unconscious rapport with someone. But that's for another video. So if you haven't already, please do click the like button, subscribe, ding that bell button to be notified of future uploads, and I'll see you again in the next video with some more magical awesomeness. But until next time, as always, stay magical.
please subscribe to Real World Magic. While you're there, click the bell button to be notified of future uploads, and have a look at all of my social stuff. Remember to donate on Patreon if you really liked it, and I'll see you again next week.